Welcome back, and we are days away from the first race boats launching for the America's Cup this year in Barcelona. So this is very much the last opportunity for the analysts to have their turn at speculating. And today we're talking about the foils. So with me, I've got Tom Partington and Rob Gullan. And we're going to look through the development of the teams through the Recon, study all the photos, and give you our opinions on where the teams are heading and what we're likely to see from these next generation AC75s when they launch. We're going to break this down by kind of effectively like features, and the definitions of these features are pretty vague, but their terms have been bandied around from the last Cup and have been extended into this one. So the first one we're going to talk about, and this was like the big thing of the last Cup, because the defenders, Emirates Team New Zealand, had a T-foil and all the other teams had some sort of anhedral in it, and we called them Y-foils. And Team New Zealand won the Cup convincingly, yet Y-foils haven't completely died. We have seen some. So can I just go to you, Tom, and just get your opinion on, do you think any boats are going to launch with Y-foils? We have seen a few in the Recon.
Yeah, I think, obviously going back to what Emirates Team New Zealand did last Cup, they were flying the boat in a different way to everyone else. They're flying with the T-foil out of the water, reducing their area, trying to reduce the drag. There's a small penalty of a bit of spray drag, but no other teams were able to do that because of the angle of incidence as the foil coming out the water. For Team New Zealand, it wasn't ventilating, whereas for other teams, if they would try to do that, it would ventilate, the air would then run down the foil. So the way that they ran their program last time, it's not surprising that most of the teams have gone down that route.
And I'll hark back to a previous video if you've not watched it, but looking back through the data that's collected for the TV, looking at how often the teams were altering their foil cants, so how far these foils were held up from the boats, what we saw was Team New Zealand basically trimming that foil cant more than the other teams. So the only plus side I really saw for the Y foils was it gives you a little bit more stability, but you know, it's the foil cant is powered by battery, so it's not costing your grinders anything to keep on trimming that. So as long as you can keep that system maintained so it functions properly, which is critical, then really going for the kind of twitchier T-foil makes sense, exactly as you said, because you get to the bottom of the box, more leverage, better intersection with the water. So yeah, I think looking at like the track record of all the boats, most of them seem to, if they have tried a Y-foil, tried it pretty early in the cycle. We saw Emirates Team New Zealand have, well, we call it banana foil, it's really bent, but effectively it is kind of like a Y-foil. Luna Rossa had a Y-foil, but most of them, the later foils, seem to be T-foils. I think the only team that's really hard to tell is Ineos, because they launch with two, externally looking, as far as I can tell, I've gone through all the photos, identical T-foils. And then they've gone to this W foil, which was a relic from the last Cup, and then a really bent kind of, their own kind of version on the banana foil. Rob, what do you think of Ineos's kind of design arc? Is it a design arc? Or is it
I don't really know. It does seem a bit random. And I mean, yeah, those foils, the first two foils look really similar. They made comments, oh, they look similar from the outside, but maybe they're not. So what were they alluding to there? Maybe they were different control systems side to side. Maybe they were looking at different sections, but we think it'd be pretty weird to be testing sections at full size on a boat. Like, that just seems like a bit of wasted effort, to be honest. That wings have existed for a long time, and there's pretty good ways of simulating that. And then I guess the Y foil, the W foil had probably people within the team who had seen potential in that in the last cycle and probably wanted to at least put that to bed once and for all, one way or another. And then they got rid of it. And then their fourth foil looked pretty much like everyone else's foil. So, yeah, I don't know.
And I get why they've done the T-foil, because last Cup they probably arguably had the worst or the slowest foils. But the W foil looked completely out of place with kind of how you expect the foils to be looking at this stage. So that's an interesting one as to, they obviously, that was part of their last cycle and they've revisited this one.
There was obviously reason to look at it properly with a bit more time and at least give it the chance it deserved. And maybe they learnt something from that they can put into the rest of the cycle. Maybe we'll see the W foil on the boat, but I would be very surprised.
That would be the biggest curve. Well, so the W foil, they only had on the boat for literally a month. I think it was 10 days sailing it was on the boat for, and then it's not come back since. So either there was something incredibly good they didn't want to see anyone
20% faster.
or they just disregarded it. It does seem to fly completely against everything we've seen on all the other foils. They're all going sleeker, more and more hidden kind of mechanics of it is harder to see in later and later foils, whereas that you had the external hinges on it, all those linkages, different flat pieces. It did look very counter to the trends we've seen. Next item, this was another thing that Emirates Team New Zealand foils were effectively famous for in the last Cup, was this blended bulb. So when we talk about that, we're talking about how it tapers out from the central bulb out into the wings. And looking at the development of the teams, a lot of them have started with something similar to that feature. But actually, of all the teams, Emirates Team New Zealand are the one who have moved away seemingly from their winning formula into a more kind of torpedo-like central bulb and then just wings sprouting out with seemingly little kind of blending at the root. Are we going to see less blended bulbs this time than last time?
I think so. The idea is, I think the theory behind having a blended bulb is just to kind of soften the pressure distributions as you go round from your kind of your frontal area into your wing. So you can see why that's a route that they went down to start with. Like, high pressure peaks can lead to cavitation and unnecessary drag. So you can see why that was a thing to start with. Where Team New Zealand have gone is really aggressive the other way. There's almost no radius now between their bulb and their wing.
I mean, just picking on something you just said about reducing those pressure peaks when they're close together, do you think the kind of reduction in the blended bulb might be because the wings have moved further and further back from the leg?
So you've seen this with 14s, like on a 14T foil, because you want the foil under the crew weight. If you could, you'd have the foil literally mounted by this tiny little point on the leading edge of the rudder in these boats, because they want those wings as far back as they can for the forward pitching moment. If you could, you'd have a bulb that was a perfect knacker section, like torpedo keel bulb shape, and then you'd literally have your wing attached to that by this tiny little atom of material, and the wing would effectively be hovering behind the back of the bulb. You clearly can't support the weight of the boat on something that small, so it's all a compromise as to like how far do you have to deviate from that perfect knacker section bulb and wing into a knacker section that will then support the weight of the boat on that wing. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, that phenomenon of moving the wings back on the boat is why we're not going to really see blended bulbs anymore.
Yeah. Some of the teams almost like a little bit behind Emirates Team New Zealand here, where they're picking up their old design with a blended bulb, and what we've seen with Team New Zealand is they're kind of like a step ahead and taking this to the next levels. Like, well, actually, if we're putting our lifting surface back really far, then we don't need that kind of blending in.
I think this is just really interesting in how the design team's working, because this is a perfect example of an area where you're going to need like your hydrodynamicists to be working really tightly with your structural guys.
It's a classic fluid structure interaction challenge. Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. It's how well that team's working, and actually, to be honest, I think this comes down to how good the structures team are. and how well they understand the loading, because that really drives how small that bulb, the blended or the lack of blended bulb can be.
And in there we have the linkages to operate the flap, and the flap is right at the back edge of all this with the greatest amount of load on it as well. So we read some stuff from Tom Spear about how they're using quite large flap by cord and really loading them up as well. So that has its own complexities as well, I imagine.
Yeah, like the more material you take out of the section supporting the foil, the larger the kind of orifice to get through to your flap is for control linkages. So like the stiffer they can be, but then you're just taking material out of the structure. So if you put loads of material in the structure, you can have really spindly linkages and have no flap control.
Well, I think that's it really. It's the flap. The linkages are key, and they'll be driving a lot of. It goes back to this whole indirect. It's not just your structures. It's actually your mechanical engineers as well. So it's a full. It sees every area of the design team really.
Yeah, they're going to they'll just be looking at that linkage and say, we need this much. We need to apply this much force to move that flap at these speeds, and to apply that force, we need this cross-sectional area of linkage. You have to give us that space, otherwise you're going to sacrifice flap control.
And that manifests as flutter as well, which can either be because of the structural design and the linkage design, both of them together, not kind of being rigid, kind of leads to that flutter. Right, last point, and I've put this in with the foil speculation because it's something that touches water, but it's actually mostly out the water, and this is the elbow. So the boats obviously have wings on the end of these arms stick out either side, and the elbow is the corner of that arm. And what we saw from, in fact, Team New Zealand specifically had it, but also American Magic had them in the last cup, was these kind of like elbow flanges, protrusions. And there's a couple of speculations for why they would bolt on an extra flange around their foil arm. So first of all, they're allowed to build, they get given a structure foil arm, is one design, but then they can do the fairing around it. And they can also, what they can do that fairing is either house mechanics, or the weight of these wings is like basically the weight of a car. It's like almost a ton. They can put also in the arm fairing as well as in the foil. So, I mean, Tom, just running through a little bit of the pros and cons of putting weight in a foil versus weight in an arm.
So the further you have, when the foil is out, the further you have your weight out, obviously it's a benefit for this situation.
For writing moment.
For writing moment, yeah.
My feeling on it is it's what you give up is a little bit of writing moment by removing that weight away from, like, if you put it in the bulb and you've got a T-foil, then that's as far away from the leeward lifting surface as you can get it to the maximum writing moment. But you're not a whole heap of distance away if you just move it up onto the arm, and any mass that you've not got in the water is less volume. So if you're going for skinnier bulbs, then that's good because you can make them skinnier still. What's down there can be more structural than lead.
I think that the boats have just got so much writing moment anyway that having an additional, what are we talking? Having that lead in, it's maybe it's 50 to 100 kilos of lead that you've moved from the tip of the foil up a metre. So it's not insignificant, but in the context of like the total writing moment generated by the boat, it's pretty insignificant. Whereas if you can like literally half your profile drag, that's way more significant.
I think that's probably why would you have any unnecessary underwater area? Yeah. And so actually what we're probably seeing is that in the last cup, the foils were a lot bigger, the bulbs were bigger, so actually naturally they could house a lot more weight.
So the counter theory to this that came from the Italian guides over at Sail Ring, and they were talking about these kind of structures around the arm to foil interface being kind of shaped like boats, and I've got American Magic up on the screen here, and I think the other one they were looking at was Emirates Team New Zealand here, which actually stretches forward of the arm. Do you think it could be a hydrodynamic kind of spray deflector or boat surface piercing boat?
I think it's a handle. It's a handle for when you've got to climb on the foil.
A boat surface piercing boat. No.
Well, I guess
If
you are going to take inspiration for something to go on a boat, it may as well be a boat. So
Blair Tuke was asked specifically about this, and he said it's about weight distribution. So I won't claim this complete as my theory, but inferring on from that, we spoke a lot in the last episode when we looked at the hulls and how the crew have all been moved as far forward in the boat during the last cup, and the foil's lifting surfaces, the wings actually move backwards, and we've talked again about how those wings have moved back relative to the arm. So if you are going to take weight up from below the surface, from out of the bulb, and put it on the arm, then why would you not put that weight as far forward on the arm as possible? And yeah, we're talking like probably half a metre further forward there, but if that is the weight of a person, half a metre forward, we've talked about moving crew members inboard to get them further forward, then it's another logical like jump on that, kind of like get all your weight as far forward as possible, get your lifting surface as far back as possible.
So Team New Zealand obviously tested this at a point when Team New Zealand must have built their foil.
Well, no. So this is actually one of the more interesting things, and again, I won't take credit for it. It was some guy on a forum pointed this out. They were making these revisions to their foils. In fact, only brought out their fourth foil after Christmas, which is, a tiny amount of time, really late. However, in the rules, you can't put new foils on the legacy AC75s. But you can put legacy foils on the new AC75. So there's no reason that they can't launch next week with their old set of foils from Tiwahutai.
So everyone should do this. You'd actually be pretty mad to launch with the new set of foils at this point.
Well, unless they were completely
Unless
useless.
people missed it in the rules. But yes, in many ways, and you'd leave it as late as possible to... Because you can... The only caveat to that is if your legacy foils are so incompatible with your new platform because of where the lifting surface is, or because the actual actuators are so different. I think that brings us to a close on our foil speculation for the AC75s. We are hotly anticipating the launch of boats this week and next week. So I've heard rumours of Lingy launching this week. We've seen officially from Lunarosa's channel that they're launching next week. We've seen from Ineos their boats on the move, probably somewhere within about 2 miles of us right now, getting the ferry from Portsmouth to, I can't remember if they're going to Bilbao, Santander, but whatever, Spain.
They'll probably break it. I bet you it's broken when it gets there. Would that surprise you?
Yeah. Orient Express's boat, we've seen that leaving Brittany, I think it was manufactured in, so that's on the road. And American Magic's boat was flown from New York State to Barcelona. So that's in Barcelona, arrived at the base. So all the boats getting in the right area. So it's going to be a very exciting month, and we'll try and bring you some kind of initial reaction videos. Yeah, I think the big one's going to be Ineos and how ugly they make it. They've got a lot to live up to, haven't they, design-wise?
Well, we've seen some kind of images of it under wraps, and I think it actually looks kind of good.
Okay.
It's leaving a lot less to the imagination than the other boats are in their wrapping format.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it looks all right.
Okay, well, on that bombshell, we'll leave you, and we'll probably catch you in the coming days for some actual race boats for 37th America's Cup. Take care and see you around.